Hello,
Hello,
I'm Jen,
I'm Kimberly.
and this is that Vegan Morning Show. Hey, we didn't cut each other off this time.
We didn't. How fun. Good morning. Hi, Angela. Welcome.
Hello,
Hi.
Angela. Today we have a special guest. Angela, you're our second guest on that Vegan Morning Show.
Oh, well, I'm honored and thrilled to be here.
We're really thrilled that you're here.
We really are. And we always start by talking about our weekends. But before we do that, Kimberly, do you mind introducing and sharing a little bit more about who Angela is in case anyone doesn't know?
I'd love to. So, right from Angela's bio, Angela Crawford, PhD, is a clinical psychologist, vegan educator, and author of The Vegan Transformation, A Journey to Heal Yourself and the World. She previously worked as a psychotherapist for 25 years, empowering clients toward greater holistic well-being, a speaker and teacher about the a speaker and teacher about the psychological benefits of veganism. She is passionate about the power of personal transformation to create a more fulfilling and purposeful life and a kinder, healthier world. Welcome, Angela.
Welcome, Angela. We need a kinder, healthier world. And Kimberly, reading the word psychological at this hour in the morning, I would probably trip over that also.
Thank you.
So welcome, Angela. So before we get, me and Kimberly always start with what we did over the weekend. So you can either go first or me and Kimberly can go first. So who wants to go first?
Why don't you go first?
All right.
Well, Kimberly, my weekend was, I have less to say about my weekend than Jen does. So I'll go first. The favorite part of my weekend was on Saturday morning. I went down to visit with my parents, who were actually kind of busy, but they have a pool in their backyard, and that was really what I was there for.
It was a good weekend for a pool.
It was. And I brought a book with me that I had just started. And by the time I left my parents' house, I had like 50 pages left. So wow. I had a really good few hours of just like reading. And of course, like I interacted with my parents in between all the stuff they were doing. But it was really nice to see them and really nice to just be in the pool. Oh, so good. And I wish I could be there again today because it's going to be hot.
It is going to be hot. Your weekend sounds so lovely and relaxing. Mm-hmm. Mine was lovely and not so much relaxing, but it was still lovely. My oldest stepson got married yesterday. And so the whole weekend was just filled with different events and celebrations pre-wedding. And then there was the wedding. And by the time we got home and everything, but I'm here and functioning. So it was really nice. And it was the first time our three kids were together, all together. I have my son, Joseph, and then my husband has two boys. And it's usually one is home when the other one's not. And it's just been, so anyway, it was really nice to have all three of them and have an updated photo of them together, because I have a whole collection of photos of them like little non-ups. So now I have something to show them, a representation of where they are now as adults. So that's the quick version of my weekend. Angela, how was your weekend?
Yeah, it wasn't anything too exciting, but on Saturday I did go to the farmer's market and get some veggies. So that was nice. And we're getting ready to go to the National Health Association conference in Cleveland next weekend. So just had to kind of try to do a little shopping to see if I found any clothes I like to wear, but I didn't find anything. I haven't been shopping in a while. And then what else did we do? Well, we had my sisters-in-law over for dinner yesterday and had kind of vegan stuff on the grill. They're not vegan, but they do enjoy our cooking. So my husband's and my cooking. So that was nice to have them there. So it was a fairly relaxing, but hot weekend.
Definitely. Well, your weekend also sounds lovely.
Yeah. I love that your sisters-in-law are eating vegan when they visit you and that they enjoy it. And they've told you that. It's really interesting to me with certain family members or friends throughout the years that I've been doing this, where they're almost offended that if they come to my house that there wouldn't be some kind of animals available to them to eat. And I mean, they're not really in my life that way anymore. And that's one of the reasons. It's like, come on, why would you expect that I would be doing that for you? And they kind of see it like, well, I would accommodate you. I would make sure that you had food to eat, but it's not the same at all,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, so true. It's just, it's such an ethical choice. And, even if you were, even if someone was doing it for health, for many of us, the ethics, would make it where you're not going to cheat, quote unquote,
Mhm.
to just have a little, as sometimes people think. I think there's this cognitive block to seeing the ethical part of this for people that haven't yet made the leap.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And I can relate to that. Like, I never thought I would want to go vegan. I remember in high school, there was a classmate who was like vegan and her talking about it. I remember thinking, I would never want to do that. Right? It sounds so complicated. Right. And of course, this was also like in the late 90s. So it was probably more complicated then too. But people have done it for a long time. And Kimberly, I know you've had guests on who've been like longtime vegans.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just interesting. So when I switched to being vegan, it started off for the health reasons, and then it pivoted over to the ethical reasons. And all of this, and Kimberly, this was a great segue because this all ties in about Angela's book, which I have here, The Vegan Transformation,
Oh,
that I bought when, yeah.
I'll get my copy in July.
That's right. Yeah, Kimberly, because you and I finally met. We've known each other for like over a year now, and you've been on my YouTube channel a couple times. And later, when the replay's up, we'll put the links up to those episodes. But yeah, we met in person back. It was like a month ago, 3 weeks ago, at the Veg
yeah,
Out in Troy.
yeah. That was June 1st.
It was June 1st. I've like lost track of time altogether. I have a photo of our meeting. Here it is. There we are. Yeah, it was a really good time. It was finally nice to meet you in person. And yeah, it's so funny how it's like we already known each other for a while. And yeah, which overlay did we use before, Kimberly? Was it this one? I think
Yeah,
so.
it was cool for June 1st. I
Very
remember that.
Yeah, it was cold and rainy. It was like weird. And that's how it is in New York State. Did I put up the right overlay, Kimberly, or did I use the wrong
Yeah,
one?
I got it. But while you're in the middle of that, let's say hello to Richard. Good morning, Richard. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Richard, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today so early. Yeah, Kimberly usually does the overlay tech support, and I do like the editing. So I'm just like clicking. I got lost and confused.
No worries. There we go. We're all set. And by the way, for those of you who are watching, Angela's here. If you have questions for her, please put them in the comments and we'll make sure to ask anything that you'd like to know about vegan transformation, about Angela, about her book. Please make sure to put them in the chat. And that applies to the replays. We can, if we get some good questions, maybe we can send them off to Angela and get you some responses.
Absolutely. And Kimberly and I do check the comments. So don't feel like you can't post anything in the comments. We'll get to you. May not be right away. It might take a day, but we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Yeah. So Angela, can you share a little bit briefly about what the vegan transformation is about?
Sure. So many of us are aware of certain positive benefits of a vegan lifestyle. Some people go on this path for health reasons and they transform their health. Other people awaken to the ethics and realize animals are treated in a way that just isn't right. And, we start to realize this whole system of animal agriculture and realize we don't want to be part of it anymore. So there's a lot of books about those topics, the ethics and the health benefits, and growing numbers about the environmental impacts as well. But one thing that, as a psychologist, I saw missing in the things I was reading was how does becoming vegan affect us on a more psychological, emotional, and spiritual level? And I myself had some really inspiring changes in those ways. I think it's made me a more authentic person and more true to myself, and brought all these other shifts that came alongside that. And I met other people who said the same thing, other vegans. And so I wanted to study that. Part of my background is doing like interviews and research with people. And so that's, what I did is surveyed and interviewed a lot of vegans and found out what their paths were. And then the book is about the common themes that came through those interviews and surveys that I did, and the different ways that people had positive shifts, and then also the challenges as well, emotionally and socially, and how did people manage those and thrive through those.
I love that. One of the things that happened to me, I went vegetarian first. I was vegetarian for a lot of years before I went vegan. But when I first went vegetarian, I was so appalled by what I had learned that I felt it was now my job to tell everyone, whether they wanted to know or not, and whether I had an effective approach or not. Anyone I interacted with, I needed to tell them what I had learned, and because they need to know it too. I was, almost 21. I hadn't really developed ways of having these types of conversations, right, with people. And I was very much in your face. I wore a lot of clothing that was in your face. I had a t-shirt. I think I got it from PETA, but it was one side of the shirt was a photo of a cow's head hanging from the slaughterhouse and blood dripping from it. And on the other side, it said, "Do you want fries with that?" And
Wow.
I was so just like, yeah, look at my shirt and talk to me about this. And it was interesting because I really wanted people to know, and nobody was listening to me. People were not interested. And as I settled into being vegetarian, and then I knew that veganism was the goal. And I just I look back now and I'm like, come on, you really could have gone vegan right from the start, but I didn't. I eat a lot of cheese, whatever. But as I went over the years, my conversations with people became more effective. And I found that sometimes, even without wearing super graphic clothing and without getting in someone's face, I could have a conversation where they would walk away going, "Oh, okay, I understand why she's doing this." And maybe some of them even would look into it themselves and then make a decision on their own to change their life. But it did take a lot of the back and forth of fighting with people and realizing that this was not working, and that it wasn't authentic to me to be that person that was in your face yelling at you about what you should be doing with your life. And so now obviously my approach is much, much different, but I did have to go through kind of these growing pains of learning how to have those conversations.
Thanks for sharing that, Kimberly. First of all, when I feel like we're 21, we go through a lot of growing pains, being an adult in general.
Yeah.
I look back at the age of 21 and I'm like, yeah. You think you're an adult, and then when you're more of an adult, you realize you're not much. I call it the toddlerhood of being an adult. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like meeting people where they're at, where they're receptive. And when for me, with my journey, I realized I had a sensitivity to dairy. I was having skin issues, and I was reading how food can impact that, and getting looking up dairy-free recipes. I decided to give myself a challenge. 30 days off of dairy. Let me see what could happen. What's the worst that could happen, right? So I looked up recipes, and a lot of vegan recipes came up. And then Forks Over Knives came up, which is whole food, plant-based recipes. And they have information on how to implement whole food, plant-based lifestyle into your life. And I was it planted a big seed. And it took me 2 years to fully transition to being vegan, but I knew there was something in me that had that, like what Kimberly said, like an end goal of, I would love to just be vegan one day. But then in my head, it was like, but you can't be vegan, Jen, because your family's not going to be vegan. What are people going to say? How, and as someone who's been a recovering people pleaser for a big part of my adult life, I realized that this was an area where I needed to do some more healing, where I wasn't a people pleaser in other areas of my life. But oh, wait a minute. This is something that's clearly important to me. It's like calling me in my heart, but I'm putting other people's values ahead of my own. And what I love about your book is when we first met last year and you told me about this book, I'm like, oh, wow, I can relate to this so much. It made me think about the things I don't normally think about as being a vegan, of all of the other things that shifted and changed in my life from going vegan, which the ethical part was what finally made me like commit fully. It took me like 2 years of just trying different recipes and maybe going vegan for a month and then going vegetarian and then kind of like omni again and kind of just going back and forth until I was finally in that place where I was ready. And I think a big part of like the work that me and Kimberly do is we love sharing vegan stories on our platforms because we want to show people how these journeys can look different for everybody, and to show that it is possible to go vegan. Maybe you can't go vegan overnight, but you can go vegan. It is possible, and it doesn't have to be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, so true. And what you mentioned about the ethics, I think for a lot of people, and including those I interviewed, many that went vegan for health reasons, they did over time connect with the ethics. And I think, the research suggests that when you have more than one reason, and especially if one of those is ethical, it does make you more, does make people more committed to the lifestyle and less likely to relapse away from it. So I think that journey of awakening, sometimes when people aren't eating animals anymore, they can be more open to what happens to animals and, to want to really be committed to this change. So, for me, I think I had some people pleasing tendencies that I wasn't aware of too. Even, I saw myself as very independent, but when it came to I first was vegetarian for many years, similar to Kimberly. And then when I became vegan, just realizing it was just something I needed to commit to be more fully aligned with my values. There was some stuff I had to break through, both practical challenges of just how to make certain, find vegan products and certain kinds of things and cosmetics and other stuff. But then also beyond the practical part, was handling social situations, with family, in-laws, social, gatherings. And, it took a while to figure out my way of handling those, realizing like, hey, you can speak up with people ahead of time instead of trying to wing it at the actual event where you're not necessarily wanting to get into a big dialogue at a dinner table or something with people, especially when it's new to you and you're still trying to figure out your own feelings about it. Mm-hmm. So I finally learned, to be proactive and learned different skills, decided it was worth learning those skills to be able to honor my values, and, went from being very, very introverted, I'd say, to, much more publicly present through a website and blog articles and podcasts, and now a book. And I will say, the book is a great way to share the message because we all have our different styles, I think, in sharing what matters to us. And so for me, writing and sharing about that writing is one of the ways that works well for me.
Yeah. I know for me, if I had not come to this from the ethical side of it, it never would have stuck. I look back at, different diets I've followed, and if I had viewed it only as a new way for me to eat or seen it as this is going to be the thing that finally helps me lose weight for good, it never would have stuck. But when I first went vegetarian, like I didn't even know how to cook. I didn't like vegetables. My family was like, all right, we'll see if this is going to stick, because they knew I didn't eat anything, and so no one was really sure that it was going to happen except for me, because I knew that I could not contribute to that anymore, and it didn't matter in how it affected me. And for so long, I didn't care about my own health. It was about the animals. Like, yeah, I know I've got a weight problem. I should probably stop eating so many, vegan cookies and ice cream and stuff. But it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, because it was more important to me to be happily vegan and be able to kind of push that out for people to really understand just how full of a life it is outside of what you're eating, that it wasn't really a concern for me. Now, of course, I'm in my 40s and I'm like, oh, I really need to take care of myself. I feel like really stiff and uncomfortable so much. So now I'm focused on making healthier choices, but that ethical piece is always having something bigger than myself has made it be a permanent, real thing for me in my life.
Yeah.
Same. That's what, because for me, it was like when it was all about the health stuff, that's when I would kind of like flip flop, where it was like, all right, I'll be vegan during the week, but I'm going over to my sister-in-law's house and I don't want to impose on them. So I'll just eat meat here. And as time went on doing that, it was not resonating with me anymore. Like, I just couldn't do it. And, I like what you said, Kimberly, about how you can live a full life on a vegan diet. Like, it always frustrates me. Like, a common thing non-vegans will challenge me on, like, people who are in not like close family, but like family I don't see too often, or other people like me who are not vegan. Well, vegan food's not healthy. And then they'll go on, Beyond Burgers are processed, or this product is processed, right? And I'll tell them, well, veganism isn't a diet. You can live just like as a non-vegan, you can eat as healthy or as unhealthy as you like. You can do the same thing on a vegan diet. And I had this conversation over the weekend where I said, I like to eat healthy for the most part, and I try to, but if I want ice cream, or I want cookies, or I want some other kind of snack, or if I want, a burger, or something that is like that fast food feel, and there's a vegan version of it, yeah, I'm going to want to treat myself just like you would want to treat yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, I really like what you said about having a full life, because you can have a full life on a vegan diet, more so now than ever. I've been vegan for a little over 8 years now. And I remember for a couple of years, I couldn't just walk into a regular grocery store and find vegan cheese or vegan ice cream. I'd have to go to like a more specialty store, like a health food store that would offer those alternatives. Now you can go into Aldi's, Walmart, like all the main chains out there, and you can find vegan products.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think, my food palette and choices expanded greatly when I became vegetarian and then vegan. I started cooking. I started trying new foods I'd never had before. I used to have a very limited repertoire. And, I think it's interesting that I think there's been a marketing campaign by the meat and dairy industries to make it seem that vegan food is all processed. And first of all, the majority of Americans eat processed food and fast food, and they're not vegan. We're only something like 2 to 3% of the population. The majority of Americans, Westerners, eat some form of processed food, and processing varies. Some things are very, very, as they call, ultra processed, and probably are not so healthy. There's some things that are more, most of us eat something that's like mildly processed. You have hummus, and you can say that's processed because it was put in the food processor, but you could still recognize every ingredient that was put in there and do it in your own kitchen, So I think there's just varying levels of processing, and yet most of us have food that has some processing.
Yeah.
And so it's just choosing, like you're saying, Jen, making wise choices, whether, whatever lifestyle you're living, making wise choices. But, with veganism, you can like you say, make different choices and have mostly whole foods. That was the way veganism really started for most early vegans, was more whole foods because there weren't processed options. So, but yeah, I think it's just a way to kind of avoid really looking at the issues underneath. So, and what you guys were saying, I think what I found through my research and my own personal journey is it's that values alignment that is the core transformation that leads to so many other shifts, because most of us are compassionate for animals. We wouldn't want to see harm to them. And yet the industries sort of keep us from seeing what's happening unless we really make a concerted effort to find out. And so once we really face what we probably knew deep down and make this choice, there's this freedom and peace that comes with, yeah, now I'm not participating in something that truly in my heart knows that doesn't feel right. And then when that happens, like other things come with that, peace, expansion of our compassion, a sense of interconnectedness with other beings and the world, and sort of a fulfillment that, like, well, I can't fix everything in the world. There's one choice or, certain choices I make each day that can make a difference. So it's most vegans that I've talked to, don't want to go back. They, if anything, just regret. I didn't, as you were saying, Kimberly, earlier, and Jen too, and me as well. I wish I'd made this choice sooner.
Yeah. When I went vegan, I think the transformation, the moment that I did it and I knew that it was forever, I felt like I had come home.
Yes.
I just felt so much myself, and like this was the final piece that was missing from my life.
Yeah.
I relate to that, Kimberly, 100%. Like I stepped into myself and came home to myself in a way I didn't realize I needed to until I had done it. And it felt so right. And there's this misalignment I think we experience subconsciously, right? And people are so protective over cats and dogs, or if there's animal cruelty to other types of animals. Meanwhile, they're eating chickens and cows and pigs and other animals. Sometimes people eat exotic types of animals to show off, oh, I had rattlesnake, I overheard a conversation about this at work a while back. And I just cringed. And yeah, that people, right? It makes you really realize how much all this is a mental game, on how what we deem acceptable to eat and not acceptable to eat. And I think part of that, I've talked about this a lot on the Confident Vegan, is the cognitive dissonance that we go through, and it's not our fault. Most of us have grown up in non-vegan homes, and that's what was normal, right? It's normal to eat chicken. It's normal to eat fish. Most of us don't see how it became packaged in the store. You just go into the grocery store and you pick it up and you cook it. And that's just like part of what's normal. But if someone were to do that with a cat or a dog, people would be horrified. And as vegans, we don't see the difference. They're all sentient beings who just want to live their lives. And now they're being butchered and put on someone's plate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you expand your circle of compassion and realize how you had compartmentalized it at one point, that only certain beings were worthy of compassion. And now it's like, no, why am I making that arbitrary distinction? It's a societal and cultural thing that we've been conditioned to do. And just because something is normative and that most people do it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
I love what you just said about expand your circle of compassion, because I feel like that's something the whole world needs to do, is just expand their circle of compassion, right? Because, and Kimberly, we touched on this on our last episode. I think it was our last episode, right? Yeah, it was. Last week, we were talking about, there was a guest that you had interviewed who talked about how I don't remember exactly what you said, but we were talking about how like peace starts on the plate, right? When we're being more mindful and intentional about how we treat animals and how we respect animals and just sentient life, that's going to have a ripple effect in how we just overall treat life in general.
Yeah. Angela, can you tell us more about your book? Like, if someone were to pick it up today, what can they expect to learn about, and what are you hoping that readers come away with?
Oh, yeah. Well, there were two groups I was really speaking to. One group is the veg curious people that I know in my life, and beyond. People who may not yet be ready to just be vegan, but have some curiosity about vegan living or plant-based living, vegetarian living, and want to learn more in a way that's inviting. The book is written in a way that's inviting and non-judgmental, and really shares my own, journey as well as others, where we went from seeing the world in a certain way and kind of expanding our view as, so it shares, the journeys of myself and other vegans. It's also written for vegans who just like to learn and grow and deepen their journey, because I know I'm always reading books. I just, it can help us to be more joyful and impactful as vegans, and to realize that we're doing something big when we make this commitment. We may not be able to change the world, but it's through our actions and our transformation that we can have a ripple effect. And so in the book, it's organized by the 7 core transformations that came through the interviews, and each chapter that invites you to look at that transformative principle, ranging from things like values and compassion to health empowerment to spirituality, and just seeing where this fits in your life with both science that shares why this matters in terms of being a full human being, and then personal stories that illustrate it through my interviews and other stuff. And then at the back, there's also a section on thriving emotionally and socially. There's a section on behavior change, how do we make the transition? And there's also some recipes. My non-vegan friends said, if you're going to write a book about veganism, you have to have recipes. So I invited some of the people I interviewed to contribute a few recipes. So there's about 25 recipes in the back. And then there's lots of resources, books and documentaries that people can go to learn more. So there's also practice exercises, reflections throughout the book that help, the reader to engage with the different ideas if they want to do that. And there's also meditations that there's a link to, I'll share it with you guys too, because I think it's very easy when I look at the book to miss where the meditations are on my website. So they're listed in the book, but you have to be one of those people that looks at the references. And so I'll share that with you guys to have a link in this show note that there are meditations that go with the book.
That sounds so great. I love how your book talks about the other aspects of veganism that aren't usually the mainstream discussion points on the topic. And it's all of those important. It's like a holistic approach to being vegan. And I love how it also creates a space that feels safe for those who are curious and want to learn more about all those the ripple effect of that change, right? Because I think that's one of the things that hold people back from going vegan is that ripple effect of, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? And by reading this book, I think that can help people ease into that transition.
I also like that you touch on the spiritual side of it.
Yeah.
For me, that was not anything that was in my life. Even from the time I was a small child, I was very much not interested. I only understood religion. I didn't know there was like another side, a spiritual thing you could do without being connected to a religion. And so I spent my younger years staunchly atheist and really vocal about that too. I was a favorite at a lot of events for sure, between that and being vegetarian and in people's face. But going vegan really, I think, also allowed me that space, to feel a connection to nature, to truly feel at home in kind of connecting with the energy of the world around me, which if my like 15-year-old self heard my 40 almost 45-year-old self say that sentence right now, oh my god, she would roll her eyes so hard and probably want to punch me in the face. So I've really gone through quite a transformation over this time, but being able to be open to that kind of connection to the world, which then has allowed me to connect with others in a different way and more deeply, I don't know that full connection would have happened without going vegan.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I had other people say that I spoke to, and I know for me it's, I think, deep in my spirituality, because when you aren't eating sentient beings, you just realize just how interconnected you are with everything. And then also, I think not consuming animal flesh, I don't know, it can lighten us in some way inside. And I've had a lot of people share that they feel lighter and more in touch with their intuition, and just more at peace, because it's honoring values that most agree on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And spirituality for me, I had a little bit of a connection to it, and then it definitely deepened after becoming vegan. And I remember, along with the ethical part, there was a part of me that was like, I need to do this for spiritual reasons. And at the time, thinking that, I didn't understand fully what that meant. It was just something I kept thinking. And then over time, it became more relevant, or it became more clear to me. And I didn't even think about that for a long time until looking at your book and talking to you about your book, that that was a part of it that I hadn't thought about in a really long time.
By the way, Richard has a comment. This is directed at me. This is my dad. And he is correct. I was very pushy back in the day.
That is so funny. I want to hear more stories about 15-year-old Kimberly. Please share.
Yeah, that's
real huge. One thing about me is that I have always been very strong in what I believe in and willing to tell anyone whether they wanted to hear it or not. I'm a little better about that, and I come at it in a different way now, but I guess I'm very much still that same person in a lot of ways too. So yeah, I'm glad to hold on to that piece. I love being a voice for others, and kind of, I really believe like going vegan was the most beautiful decision I've ever made in my whole life. And why wouldn't I want other people to know about that?
exactly.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're almost out of time. Whenever we have guests, we go a little bit later. Angela, you have some events coming up in the summer. Would you like to share those so viewers can know where to find you?
Sure. Yeah. So this coming weekend, I'm going to have a book table at the National Health Association, which is being held in Cleveland in July, which is the 9th through the 13th. I'll be at Vegan Summerfest, which is held in Johnstown, PA, and it's a great festival for all things vegan, that, all kinds of speakers, including some bigger name people like Dr. Greger and Victoria Moran and others. And I'll be doing some presentations there, and my book will be for sale. I'm going to be at Ethos Farm, where I get to meet Kimberly. That's in New Jersey. I've never been there before, but it sounds like an amazing place, and I'm going to have a presentation there. Those are the main things in my local Barnes and Noble in late July. So that's exciting. But at any rate, so some exciting things coming up that I'm thrilled to share about the book. And I'm really excited because some of my non-vegan friends and family have read it, and one friend in particular, he and his wife have decided to go vegan for health reasons, but they're also saying the book's making them think about some of these other reasons as well. And, they're feeling better so far. They've been on the vegan diet for about 4 weeks now, and they feeling great, and lost one of them lost some weight that they wanted to lose. So I'm thrilled that people are just taking anything from it that's helpful like that, to get them to think about the issues both. And I will just say, briefly, our health issues are important too, because there's a health crisis in our country. So it's just like I think that's one thing I've taken away from my experiences. It's all so interconnected. And that's what makes it so amazing, that caring for sentient beings, we can eat in a way that actually is one of the best things we can do for our own health and care for the planet. So it's so like, it's just such a win-win.
Love it. That sounds really exciting. And I hear all these great things about Ethos Farms. I have to go check it out sometime.
Yeah.
Kimberly, I see you shared some links.
I did. I realized that the first one kind of went into the second one for some reason. So Angela was a guest on my podcast. That episode is out today. That wound up going out this way by accident, but I'm happy that it did. So like I said, if you want more Angela, head over to Did You Bring the Hummus? It's a brand new episode. And then also, again, the sign up to meet Angela at Ethos Farm. I'll be there too as a friend of Ethos. And
Yay.
then the NHA website, if you'd like to check out the conference, I've included that there as well.
Cool.
Yay. Wow, you move quickly, Kimberly. Great job throwing them all in there.
Thank you.
Was there anything else, Angela, that you wanted to share, or anything you would like viewers to know before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we covered some great stuff. If people do read the book and like it, I do welcome reviews on Amazon too, because I think that helps more and more people to know about it and to explore it. And I'm really just wanting both those who might be curious about a plant-based lifestyle to find this book and realize all the benefits for them as well as beyond, for things we care about. And then, for those of us who are vegans, so that we really are thriving vegans, because it's thriving vegans that will impact others around us to make the changes we hope to see in the world.
Yeah, and I think you're setting a great example of how to promote veganism in a way that's more attractive to people who are like, I could never live that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So I think you're creating a really welcoming space for people to check that out or to share that information with other people in their life.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. And thanks for both of you, what you guys do to do that as well.
Yeah, like what Kimberly said, I was the opposite of Kimberly. I didn't speak up at all, barely. And then that part of myself developed over time, realizing the terrible things that can happen in your life if you don't speak up. And so, and then, cultivating those skills. And now, like Kimberly, it's like, I need to share things that are important and life-changing with the world. And so I think that's a big driving force for my work on the Confident Vegan. And I know that's also a big part of what you do with Did You Bring the Hummus?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Angela. It's early in the morning, so we appreciate you getting up and having a chat with us today.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And again, if you're watching the replay, please comment in the chat. And even if you don't have a question, just let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to know who's watching us.
Exactly. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.